So earlier this year, when we launched our new series, This Movie Exists, I mentioned I didn't really know what it meant for the future of Schlocktober, whether I'd move the tradition there, since it's more of a movie-centered thing, or keep doing it as a yearly big picture event, since it might be odd to have two movie things going for a whole month, and well, with that series still being new and finding its footing, my read right now is that the future is still the future, so I'm splitting the difference and doing a cross-promotion. You're gonna get a more old-school Schlocktober classic version of at least two flicks here on Big Picture in a slightly different format, and a robust, different recipe combo version with the same two because they're a series over on TME, which, yes, also gives us more traffic for the month. What do you want me to say?
I'm in debt up to my eyeballs.
Yeah, pretty much that. Anyway, how long have I been doing this bit? 13 years, and in all that time we've only seen Vincent Price show up really a couple times? That feels wrong. So this year, only Vincent Price. A complicated, and many would say underappreciated or even underutilized, which sounds odd considering he made well over 100 movies and even more TV, radio, and theater appearances, known for playing larger-than-life but not always over-the-top and often oddly sympathetic villains, mostly but not exclusively in horror and science fiction films, with a cutting, sometimes catty sense of sarcastic humor. Vincent Price was a sought-after character star as early as the 1940s, but by the 1960s and 70s, with many other vintage horror and thriller stars of Golden Age Hollywood, even just a few years his senior, either too far into semi-retirement or poor health to ride the then-incoming waves of nostalgia, camp appreciation, retro-gothic irony, the Euro horror invasion, etc., Price found himself ideally positioned as the classy elder statesman but with an edge actor who could reliably show up, give 110%, and never let on if he thought the material was beneath him, even if it probably was. Basically, imagine if Ian McKellen and Nicolas Cage were the same guy.
I am afraid, madam, that he has made his final crossing to that Stygian shore.
What?
He's dead. Are you some dark-winged messenger from beyond? Answer me, monster. Tell me truly. Shall I ever hold again that radiant maiden whom the angels call Lenore?
How the hell should I know?
What a fall. All the way down the stairs. It's wonderful. But then you always were good at falling from a great height.
Can't compare, my dear Geoffrey, with your famous death scenes, which you have played so brilliantly. And for so many years, bitch.
Today in 2024, if most people think Vincent Price, I imagine what comes to mind is memorable facial expression and iconic delivery. So here's The Abominable Dr. Phibes, a movie where his face can't move and he doesn't even open his mouth. Gotta love someone who's open to a challenge. Okay, so just to knock it out of the way up front, the hook of the Dr. Phibes franchise is that these are villain protagonist movies where we mainly follow the bad guy as the audience POV character instead of the ostensible good guys. But just because we see what Dr. Phibes does or is going to do before his victims or the cops, yeah, that doesn't actually mean the movie is going to tell us what he's doing or why he's doing it any earlier than the good guys figure it out. So these are still really strange movies about a really odd villain. We're just spending more screen time with him because it's more interesting that way, not because it necessarily makes any more sense. Case in point, this guy playing the organ with the clockwork robot backup band and the cloak at the beginning, that's Dr. Anton Phibes. The girl assistant is Volnavia. Why are they lowering a birdcage into a car in the basement? What is in the birdcage? Why does this process require musical accompaniment and a costume change for both of them? Or any process period when apparently they're the only ones involved in it, especially when we haven't been told who these people are and just kinda have to assume one of them must be the abominable Dr. Phibes because the movie is called that? Only one of those questions will ever be answered. The cage has killer bats in it, and they went to put them in this guy's house.
Good morning.
And Scotland Yard is on the case.
Ooh, they're nasty looking little blighters, aren't they?
Seen them in Mandalay. It's like your throat dry, they were.
Yeah, well, that's where they belong, in the tropics. I mean, not here, not in a place like this. Yes, all right, thank you very much. Take them all off to the laboratory, would you?
Right, sir.
And have them double-checked for rabies.
Yes.
Now, Morgan,
Yes, sir?
Where the hell are you?
I'm up here, sir.
Oh, so you are. When you're finished up there, I want you to question the butler again. Oh, don't take him out like that. At least cover his face up.
So to answer your next obvious question, is this a horror movie or a comedy? Well, it's an American International Pictures film from 1971 with Vincent Price, so the answer is yes.
Well, there was another surgeon who died. A Dr. Thornton.
What about him?
It was more the way he died. This reminded me of it. He was stung to death by bees in his library.
Bees in his library?
Basically, by the time this came out, the successful producers of B-movies and genre fare that had been in the game for a while and wanted to stay there but hadn't yet or just didn't plan to segue over into the darker, grimier grindhouse scene or full-out avant-garde horror mode basically embraced an if you liked it, then we meant to do it approach to audience appreciation. Are the people scared? Good, we got their money. Are they laughing at it? Good, we still got their money. But also, the Abominable Dr. Phibes is actually a pretty lean, style first, second, third, everything else, distant 10th, back and forth experiential loop of a movie once it hits its groove. Apart from a fig leaf narrative conceit that this is all technically taking place in 1925, so they don't have even 70s modern forensics tools to solve any of the crimes right away, you're basically watching the most flamboyant bad guy the filmmakers could think up doing a killing spree with the most unnecessarily elaborate and overdesigned deaths he can think up, and then the ultimate caricatures of dry English inspectors show up to, oh my, I do say that's a bit of business now, isn't it? What? Over the results in increasingly bewildered but also increasingly detached frustratedness.
Medical men die every day.
I'm aware of that, sir.
Good. They're composed of the same flesh and blood as you and I.
I'm aware of that too, sir. I happen to have seen rather a lot of their flesh and blood in the past few days.
Now, this is most unsettling. Thank God the newspapers have been slow in picking up these stories so far.
Well, we've managed to withhold most
I
of
don't
them.
propose to go into the seriousness of this crow, but if the press do get hold of this...
We'd have a disaster on our hands.
What the hell do you think we got at the moment?
But okay, since, like I said, part of the gimmick of the movie is following the villain, but still being mostly in the dark as to what the villain's whole deal is a lot of the time, pretty much right up until it's almost over, this is what's going on. Anton Phibes was a wealthy doctor whose beloved wife died during a surgical procedure. On hearing of her death, he races home to England from Switzerland and supposedly also dies himself in a car crash, but clearly did not, as he is now stalking around having sworn to kill the 9 surgeons he blames for said wife's death. That's Carolyn Munro playing the wife, by the way. She was considered really hot stuff in B-movies at the time, and it's sort of an inside joke of the film that she only ever appears as a dead body or a photograph.
9 killed you, 9 shall die, and be returned your loss. 9 times 9, 9 killed you, 9 shall die, 9 eternities in doom.
It's not exactly clear how Dr. Phibes survived. He's definitely not in one piece. We see him applying prosthetics. His face doesn't actually work. He has to plug a speaker cord into a port on his throat to talk. We even see him eat and drink by putting his food somewhere behind his head, I guess. Like pretty much everything else about him, the mandate here is just to make everything he does as ostentatiously weird and complicated as possible so the movie will be interesting. To that end, Phibes' murder theme is the 10 plagues of Egypt. So he kills people with, say, a swarm of locusts to represent the plague of locusts. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Draining all of a victim's blood for the plague of blood. Again, kind of makes sense. Or tricking them into wearing a mechanized frog mask that crushes their head at a costume party to represent the plague of frogs. Okay, a little more obscure. Well, Phibes himself is wearing special medallions representing ancient Hebrew symbols for each plague during the kills, which he then transfers to busts of each intended victims and lightly burns. Presumably, he made the busts himself, the last part of that ritual, again, being conducted seemingly only for the benefit of himself and Valnavia. Oh, and they're never going to tell us in either of these movies who Valnavia is and what she's getting out of any of this. Is she a robot, like the members of his Clockwork Band? Is she a demon familiar, like did he make a deal with hell to not die or something? There's not a lot of how in these movies. It's mostly what. And then each time, Scotland Yard shows up after the fact to go, "Oh my, well, that's pretty unusual if I don't say so myself."
It appears to have been fired by a catapult, sir.
Oh, brilliant.
And this time, due no doubt to some organizational oversight, you arrived there before the crime. But, as I've come to expect from you two, that made little difference.
To the film's immense credit, this is actually the only Mad Doctor movie I can think of where all of this ridiculous amount of just going wild with the art design for his own amusement aspect of Phibes' plan actually makes kind of explicit, unironic character sense, because it's also the only Mad Doctor movie that bothers to remember that doctor doesn't have to mean scientist. Phibes was a concert organist with doctorates in music and theology. Yeah, The Abominable Dr. Phibes is not a mad scientist movie, it's a serial killer movie about a mad fine art scholar. How great is that? But yeah, so in that context, shit like this actually kind of makes more sense. He's basically craft fair Jigsaw.
It's brass. He's cast the thing in bloody brass.
And actually, his device for the firstborn plague against the main surgeon does feel pretty much just like a jigsaw trap if those movies had been made for this period.
That is an x-ray of your son's rib cage. A tiny key has been lodged close to his heart. It will unlock the halter around your son's neck and will free the trolley in a few moments. Acid will be released into that tube. My wife existed only 6 minutes on the operating table, and then she was dead. You murdered her.
No.
Murdered her. When the acid reaches him, he will have a face like mine.
And as for the final one, the Plague of Darkness, that turns out to be for him is the idea. Yeah, Phibes actually does give his final nemesis basically a fair shot at winning or losing and hops into an escape pod of embalming himself alive next to his wife in a tomb the police can't discover.
He's gone.
Meaning the bad guy kind of sort of gets away with it, or at least wins here, because if the bad guy is that much more fun than the good guys, you might as well just let him have this one.
Well, what about...
Of course, you might think quietly slipping away from the finale into basically a retro stasis pod feels like a sequel setup, and that's exactly what this was. And we'll get into that one next time.